This is Damien.
It's your husband.
It is. Yeah, pretty handsome guy. He's a fascinating person. He's so kind and thoughtful, and he's great to talk to.
I would describe Damien Eccles as a very sensitive, very intelligent young man.
This is Varner Super Maximum Security Prison, where death row is housed in Arkansas. I've been on death row for the past 16 years for a crime I didn't commit.
The little boys were found in a drainage ditch, 8-year-olds, mutilated and beaten to death, sickening killings that might have been part of a satanic ritual.
They loved the wood. They were wonderful children. Christopher was a shy one. Michael Moore, he was going to be a police officer. Stevie, I'm so proud of him. He was an achiever. He was a very brilliant, wonderful baby God blessed me with.
The crime was horrific because of the victims and how innocent they were.
There was a need for swift justice at the time to placate the understandably angry and frightened community.
3 teenagers were taken into custody. They are each charged with 3 counts of capital murder.
I got a feeling you're not quite telling me everything.
Once they zeroed in on Jesse, Jason, and Damien, they didn't have to look anywhere else. It was finished.
Damien Eccles shall be sentenced to death by lethal injection.
They were easy targets.
It was very much like the Salem witch trials.
Every single piece of evidence points to their innocence, not to their guilt.
Johnny Depp has been extraordinarily helpful, and he knows this case inside and out.
Every person, every legal scholar, every expert who acquaints themselves with the facts of this case are stunned that this ever happened.
The urgency in this is Damien Eccles is on his last appeal, and he is on death row, meant to be killed by lethal injection.
They don't deserve to be in prison and on death row for something they didn't do.
People need to stand up and say, yeah, let's find the real killers and let's find justice.
A cry for innocence. Tonight's 48 Hours mystery. The mystery continues in 90 seconds.
Rain. I miss just walking outside and feeling it rain, to actually have raindrops touch your skin. To walk on grass. I haven't touched grass in over 16 years now.
35-year-old Damien Eccles has spent his entire adult life on Arkansas's death row. Every day facing the possibility of execution. But there is a bright spot in his life. Lori Davis, his wife of 10 years.
She's like a living, breathing miracle in human form.
You know, of course I miss them, but this is what our life is right now.
Lori met Damien after she became aware of his controversial case. She wrote to him, traveled from New York to see him, and offered her help.
It was the right thing to do because he is innocent.
I can understand you believing that he's innocent and wanting to work on his case. But what made you actually decide to marry him?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is I loved him. He's an amazing person, and he's going to be worth this.
Lori is now familiar with every facet of Damien's case.
There are the recent filings.
And she works day and night with the legal team, fighting not only for Damien on death row, but for Jason Baldwin and Jesse Miskelly, the other convicted men who are serving life sentences.
We have gone through every aspect of this case, and there has never been anything that pointed to their guilt.
They are known as the West Memphis Three, and they are now actively supported by people who could really make a difference.
Hi, I'm Natalie Maines, and I support the West Memphis Three.
Like Natalie Maines of the Dixie Chicks, Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam, and actor Johnny Depp.
I'm here because I firmly, truly, 1000% believe Damien Echols, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly are totally innocent.
But despite all that, the Arkansas courts have upheld all 3 convictions for more than 16 years. Prosecutors maintain that Damien, Jason, and Jesse are responsible for the cold-blooded murder of 3 8-year-old boys. On May 5th, 1993, Chris Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch were out playing together.
Stevie was a very outgoing, brilliant child. Anybody that knew him loved him.
Stevie's mom, Pam, a waitress back then, didn't worry very much when her son wasn't home before her 5 p.m. shift began.
I just figured he might have lost track of time and was on his way home.
It was when her husband, Stevie's stepfather, picked her up at 9 that she heard for the first time that the boys had still not returned.
I just started crying and saying, God, no, why isn't he home?
Pam searched straight through the night, along with other panicked parents, including Chris Byers' father, Mark.
We looked for them all around the area, and we hadn't been able to find bicycle or any clothing or any signs of them at all. I'm scared to death.
231.
Then, at 1 p.m., police made a grim discovery in a wooded strip by the interstate, known to the kids as Robin Hood Hills.
The 3 boys were found submerged in water.
Stevie, Michael, and Chris were found bludgeoned and drowned in a drainage ditch. Their bodies were naked and hogtied with their own shoelaces.
I hit the ground screaming, God, no.
Just the gut-wrenching moment. To put into words the disaster, the devastation.
6 days later, Mark Byers buried his son Chris.
When these murders happened, it was something that was almost like an atomic bomb going off. You have 3 children that are murdered. I mean, that in itself is a pretty horrific thing. And then slowly details start coming out about how they were found. Now, a lot of these details weren't true.
There were a lot of rumors.
Like what kind of rumors?
I heard that one of them was skinned. I heard that one of them's face was cut off.
Then you start hearing all these, people whispering about maybe it was Satanists that did this.
That theory did not seem so far-fetched back then.
In every state in the nation, authorities are investigating satanic activity.
A media-fueled hysteria about satanic cults was sweeping across the country.
It's the practice of evil. It exists, and it's flourishing.
An FBI investigation found no such satanic murders. But in 1993, West Memphis juvenile officer Jerry Driver was concerned about cult activity.
It seems to be a trend right now.
And he had Damien, an 18-year-old dropout, in his sights.
I was the closest thing he could come to conceiving of what he thought a Satanist would look like. All black was the only thing I ever wore. Ridiculous hairstyles. I was a stupid teenager. I really was a smartass.
Damien, you didn't help yourself too much, did you?
Oh, I didn't help myself at all. No, I didn't.
driver was convinced that the murders were the work of Damien Echols, and he told that to the police.
Police won't confirm it, but it's believed the murders were cult-related.
Damien was now a prime suspect, and word of that leaked out.
I walked into a softball game. I went around the concession stand and I hear people saying, "There he is, that's him."
I mean, and they're pointing at you because they think you might have had something to do with the murders.
Yeah.
Still, police had no physical evidence or anything else to connect him to the crime. Not until someone Damien knew spoke out. On June 6, 1993, just 1 month after the 3 8-year-old boys were found dead in the woods, there were arrests. In custody, 17-year-old Jesse Miskelly, 16-year-old Jason Baldwin, and the alleged ringleader, 18-year-old Damien Echols.
Each teenager greeted by threats from a big and angry crowd of spectators.
That's why all three of them are punks. Punks!
Stevie Branch's mother, Pam, was consumed with anger.
Beat their head up against the wall. Get them out of the way of the van! I love you, Jesse!
What were you feeling?
Anger, fear, everything in the world just went wrong, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it.
The police were confident they had the killers.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how solid do you think your case is?
11.
The key evidence? A statement that Jesse Miskelly gave them. In it, he said he saw Damien and Damien's best friend Jason abuse the 3 boys in a devil-worshipping ritual.
Did you consider Jesse Miskelly a friend?
To be honest, I didn't really think of him at all. He was just someone that was sort of on the fringes of mine and Jason's life.
The best way to describe Mr. Miskelly's capabilities is he is operating at about the level of a 5-year-old child.
Dan Stidham, now a state judge, was Jesse Miskelly's lawyer. He says it was clear his client knew very little about occult rituals.
Walked in one day and he hands me this book. On the cover it had a picture of the devil. And he said, "Dan," he said, "who is Satan?"
Satan?
Satan. Here's a kid who's supposed to have committed the very first ever satanic ritualistic homicide, yet he didn't know who Satan was.
At first, Jesse told the police he knew nothing.
I got a feeling here. You're not quite telling me everything. Now just tell us the truth.
But after hours of pressure, Jesse finally implicated Damien and Jason.
I saw Damien hit this one boy real bad. Then Jason hit Steve Branch.
And then Jesse implicated himself by saying he chased down a boy who ran away.
He thought he was helping by adding to the story, but he turned himself from a witness into an accomplice.
A lot of what Jesse said was just wrong. For example, he first said the crime took place early in the morning. But the victims were at school all day. Nevertheless, all 3 teens were charged with murder. In January 1994, 8 months after the crime, Jesse Miskelly was the first to go on trial.
Did it ever occur to you that what he was telling you was false?
Defense attorney Stidham attacked the police, not only for the tactics they used on Jesse, but for the major mistake they made.
On the night that the homicides occurred, someone had stumbled into a fast food restaurant covered in mud and blood.
That night, the Bojangles restaurant manager reported the bloody man to police.
There was an imprint of blood around the toilet.
But detectives waited until the next day to collect evidence, and then they lost it.
They had actually taken a blood sample and never got to the crime lab.
Police never identified or found that potential suspect. But at trial, their blunder was overshadowed by Jesse's own words. Jurors heard the recorded parts of his statement.
Did you see any of the boys he killed? Yes, right there.
It was enough.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, your verdict.
Jesse was convicted and sentenced to life in prison.
Are you in a cult? Are you in a cult, Damien?
Less than 3 weeks later, Damien Echols and Jason Baldwin went on trial together.
I had people standing out there screaming, telling me every morning when I would go into court how I was going to die, how the state was going to fry me.
Jesse, are you sorry for what you did?
Jesse Miskelly refused to testify against Damien and Jason. Prosecutors could not use his confession because it would have violated the defendant's right to face their accuser.
All right, call your first witness.
But two girls who were at that softball game that Damien attended testified that they overheard him admit to the murders.
And who was Damien talking to?
All the people there.
All the people there?
I don't remember saying that at the time because to me, I didn't actually do it. So it would have been like a joke.
Help me understand why you would think that's a joke back then.
It's the person I was and it's the way I thought at that time in my life. And I can't make excuses for it.
State exhibit number 77.
The state also introduced a knife found in the lake behind Jason Baldwin's home. Nothing connected that knife to the crime or the defendants.
There are injuries consistent with this type of a serrated pattern.
But the state pathologist testified that some of the wounds could have been made with a knife like it. More disturbing, he also said one boy was sexually mutilated. And that fit with the state's belief that the crime was occult-related. This witness, Dale Griffiths, claimed to be an expert on the occult.
This guy had a mail-order PhD.
Are you saying that this murder was held at an occult service?
Yes.
There were no signs of any service, occult or otherwise, at the scene. Still, Griffiths noted that the moon was full, and he offered an opinion about why the police didn't find much blood.
They will take it and store it. They will use it to bathe in. They will use it to drink.
But police didn't find any blood in Jason and Damien's homes.
You can't believe that anybody's going to take that kind of stuff seriously when you're going through it, but evidently they did. Dale Griffiths was the gasoline that they threw on the fire.
You decided to take the stand.
Yes, I did.
Have you ever participated in any type of human sacrifice?
No, I have not. I'm not a Satanist. I don't believe in human sacrifices or anything like that.
Chris's father, Mark Byers, watched as Damien explained himself.
How would you describe Damien at trial?
Arrogant and like it was a big game to him, kind of.
But I behaved in ways that were very, very stupid. There were times when I was really inappropriate.
Jason Baldwin didn't take the stand, but everyone knew that he was Damien's best friend.
Bailiffs informed me that you've arrived at your verdict.
Although no physical evidence linked them to the crime,
We, the jury, find Damien Echols guilty of capital murder in the death of Stevie Branch.
both Damien and Jason were convicted.
Do either of you have anything you want to say?
Nope.
Jason got life.
Damien Echols shall be sentenced to death by lethal injection.
Damien, believed to be the mastermind, got death.
That was the absolute worst. Absolute crushing despair is knowing that you didn't do what they sent you here for.
We, the jury, after careful deliberations, have determined that Damien Echols shall be sentenced to death by lethal injection. Signed by...
I had come to feel absolutely hated and loathed by the world.
Condemned to death row in 1994, Damien Echols had little hope. And then, 2 years later, Paradise Lost, an HBO documentary about his case, was released.
That is probably what has saved my life. I really do believe without that footage of the trials, the state would have probably already killed me by now.
The floodgates opened, he says, as outrage spread. People moved by the case organized websites. Reporter Mara Leverett detailed its flaws in a book, and Damien heard from people around the world.
This is a card he made. I think this is for my birthday, actually. It is.
Including the New York landscape architect who would later become his wife, Lori Davis.
After she found me, I just decided I'm not going to stop growing. I'm not going to stop learning.
I had never met anyone as fascinating and anyone who captured my attention as much as he did. So I wasn't going to let him go.
So you married a man that you had never touched or kissed?
Yes. Yeah, I did.
At our wedding was the first time we'd ever physically touched.
That's a tough decision. I mean,
it wasn't a tough decision at all. And there's never been a moment of doubt about it.
You do have to be creative because there is no physical intimacy like people depend on. So we may, for example, set a time every single night and drink water at the exact same time. We're both doing this. We're both connected in this moment.
What do you say to people, though, who say, you haven't had a real marriage, you haven't had a real relationship yet?
I'd say you don't know us. That's what I would say.
What if Damien never gets out?
He will get out.
You don't even entertain that possibility?
No, it's not a possibility.
Her confidence is based partly on attention people like Johnny Depp have brought to the case.
Is there something about the way Damien Echols was treated as a teenager that you can relate to?
Well, I immediately related to Damien what he went through growing up. He comes from a small town in Arkansas. I come from a relatively small town in Kentucky. I can remember being kind of looked upon as a freak or different because I didn't dress like everybody else. So I can empathize with being judged by how you look as opposed to who you are.
But is there any side of you that is concerned that if in fact these guys are innocent, why wouldn't there be a new trial?
That's a mystery to me. The most courageous action that the state could now take is to admit they made mistakes and then correct these errors.
This man, high-profile attorney Dennis Reardon, now heads Damien's legal team.
This was a death conviction that was returned without one single piece of credible evidence.
Take that knife that was fished from the lake, Reardon says.
State exhibit number 77.
The state pathologist testified that before the victims drowned, they could have been tortured with it.
There are injuries consistent with this type of a serrated pattern.
But when the current defense teams asked 7 prominent forensic scientists to examine the evidence, all 7 came to the same stunning conclusion. Animals, not humans, caused the wounds and scratches on the boys' bodies after the victims were dead.
If the injuries to these children were caused by animals after they died, then did the knife play any part in this at all?
No, there's absolutely no evidence in this case, the credible evidence that ties this or any other knife to these offenses. The focus of this is so important because the notion that there was a sexual mutilation of one of these children naturally just shook the state of Arkansas, and it added fuel to this whole notion of Satanism.
Prosecutors turned down our request for interviews. In court documents, they defend the state's trial evidence and accuse the new experts of second-guessing. But faulty testimony, says Reardon, was just one of the reasons that Damien Echols was convicted. He charges there was also jury misconduct.
These are notes taken by one of the jurors during their deliberations.
Reardon points to a juror's notes, which seem to indicate that the jury improperly discussed Jesse Misskelley's confession.
So it proves that even though the Miss Kelly confession was never introduced at trial, that was part of the deliberations.
Absolutely. The jury foreman said to himself and other jurors, he is guilty because Jesse Misskelley said he is. I read about it in the newspaper. I saw some report of this on television.
According to 4 sworn affidavits obtained over the past 6 years, that foreman admitted taking Jesse's confession into consideration, even calling it the primary factor for his decision.
That was absolutely scandalous, to convict somebody on evidence that hadn't even been produced in court. The irony of it is that the jury didn't learn what hogwash the Misskelley confession was because they weren't supposed to be dealing with it at all.
It's not just the defense calling it hogwash. This independent academic analysis of Jesse's confession concludes that he did not appear to have knowledge of the crime. Lori says that's because Damien, Jason, and Jesse did not commit the crime.
3 teenage boys, there's no way they would have been able to come home not being covered in mud, their clothes, their shoes, and possible, blood spatter. I don't think for a minute they would have been able to cover up their tracks.
Now more than 16 years after the murders, the defense is focusing on its new evidence, DNA evidence, that points away from the 3 convicted men.
So you're saying that that new DNA evidence does not match any of you, not you, not Jason, not Jesse, nothing that they tested?
No, absolutely nothing.
That DNA may be all that Damien needs.
When children are murdered, when do you not look at the families?
How does this look different than what it did in 1993?
There was woods over there, and the Robin Hood Hills area was right over there where
Private investigator Rachel Geiser has been working on Damien Echols' case for 10 years.
it's just a flat, level field pretty much now.
She's sought out anyone who might shed new light on it, like Terry Hobbs, the stepfather of one of the victims, Stevie Branch.
Terry has told me that he was never interviewed by the police.
You lose your little kids like this. See how you
At the time of the murders, Terry was married to Stevie's mom, Pam.
I walked away from that interview with Terry Hobbs thinking, wow, he's a really nice guy.
Then there was Chris's father, Mark Byers.
There's a few people I wouldn't mind going on shooting with it. But
Byers was volatile and acted oddly in the documentary Paradise Lost.
because this right here is all needs to be done to him.
From the beginning, some of Damien's supporters suspected Byers may have been involved in the crime.
This one here is for you, Damien. You that black circle right in the middle.
But don't you have a little bit of violence in your background? Your wife, your first wife, accused you of assault.
Yes, she did. I did assault her.
His second wife died of undetermined causes 3 years after her son was murdered.
She died laying in bed beside me. She was in bad health. I watched other people give up their will to live.
Byers' hard times continued. He was convicted of burglary and spent 15 months in prison.
Why do you think your life took such a bad turn after this?
I brought it mostly on myself because of the rage and anger. When I got up in the morning, I was mad. When I went to sleep, I was mad.
In 2007, new forensic tests found DNA on several pieces of crime scene evidence. It didn't match the victims, and importantly, it didn't match Damien, Jason, and Jesse. But what about the victims' fathers? Rachel needed to get DNA samples from both Byers and Hobbs, and she did.
I took his cigarette butts out of the ashtray, and then we sent them off to be tested.
The results were startling. Mark Byers was eliminated as a source of any of that DNA, But DNA from a hair found in the knot of the ligature that bound Michael Moore was consistent with Terry Hobbs, Stevie's stepfather. What's more, another hair found on a nearby tree stump was consistent with David Jacoby, a friend that Hobbs was with the night of the murders.
I was immediately floored, and so a lot of everything at that point turned to Terry.
Terry Hobbs says his hair could have been carried to the crime scene by one of the victims.
They played in our homes. If it got there by transfer, that's how it happened.
So,
if it was even my hair.
I mean, do you believe it's possible it is your hair?
I don't know. The police have never told me it was my hair.
We're presently in the CID office of the West Memphis Police Department.
In 2007, 14 years after the murders, the police finally questioned Terry Hobbs.
Possible new evidence that may have come up, and just to fill in some blanks again.
For the first time, Terry went on the record about his whereabouts that day and where he searched to find Stevie.
Did you go into the woods before you picked up Pam?
Sure.
You did. Remember about what time that was?
6:30.
Okay, who was with you at that time?
David.
Terry has told varying stories that often contradict what other people have said. For example, his friend David Jacoby, in a sworn affidavit, said he was in the woods with Terry after dark, but not between 6 and 6:30, as Terry said.
You know, David Jacoby says that you left and you went off by yourself.
Well, I went off with David. David left with me.
Is he then lying when he says that?
David didn't say that.
So you say you were never by yourself?
Correct.
Do you think Terry Hobbs is an honest guy?
No.
You said that pretty quickly.
I've caught him in quite a few lies over the years.
In 1993, Terry Hobbs' ex-wife Pam lashed out at the teenagers she believed killed her son.
That's why all three of them are punks. Punks!
Now, she has doubts.
Does that trouble you, the fact that DNA that is consistent with Terry's was found right in the ligature?
Since their divorce, they've had a contentious relationship. Looking back, Pam says that Stevie was well behaved, but that didn't stop Terry from punishing him and their 4-year-old daughter frequently.
They probably got a whooping every other night.
He would hit them every other night?
I would say so.
With a belt?
Yeah. And he would make them hold their hands in the air.
Did you hit him with a belt often? With his hands up and hit him with the belt?
No.
So you didn't hit him with a belt, with his hands up?
Well, if I ever whipped him with a belt, I wanted his hands up because I didn't want to hit him on the hands.
Do you believe he's capable, that he was capable of killing your son?
A possibility. I hate to sit here and say that and know that I stayed with the man as long as I did.
Why is this tough for you to think about?
He wouldn't be alive. He would not have the chance to breathe again if I dwell on it and I let it enter here in my heart. So I try not to think of it.
What troubles Pam is that years after the murders, she found Stevie's small pocket knife with Terry's belongings. Terry says he took it from Stevie long before the crime.
As a parent, you don't want an 8-year-old carrying a pocket knife around.
Right, but Pam says he did carry it around.
Until I took it away from him.
And when exactly did you take it away from him?
I don't know exactly when, but I did.
And as far as you know, did Stevie have that knife up until the day he died?
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying that Terry lied about that?
Terry did lie.
Hobbs bristles at the way the defense team has cast suspicion upon him.
To have your name dragged into it like they have dragged my name into it, you bet I get mad about it.
He insists he had only one purpose the night the boys disappeared.
I was on a mission to find Stevie.
But you don't have any way to actually verify what you were doing between 6:30 and 8:30 that
Oh, there's
night?
lots of people seen me out there, but I don't know them people. I didn't know them.
You didn't know their names, so you don't. If you were really worried and Stevie had never been out that late, you didn't call Pam and say, look, your son still isn't home.
Pam was working.
There is one matter on which Hobbs has been very consistent. He has always said he didn't see his stepson Stevie at all the day he disappeared.
So you're saying for a fact you did not see Stevie all day?
That's the truth.
But someone's about to challenge that.
Down there, it's the next one down.
All right, so Debbie Moyer lived just 3 houses away from Stevie Branch when he was murdered.
I was afraid for my kids to run off anywhere.
Her daughter Jamie was 13.
We were limited to the front yard or the backyard.
Did the police ever come to your door and ask you any questions whether you had seen the boys?
No.
They never did. The police never canvassed the neighborhood?
If they did, I did not see them.
So they had no role in the case, at least not until last July, when they called a tip line set up by Damien Echols supporters to report something they remembered seeing back on May 5th, 1993. Early that evening, they say, they saw the boys playing in their backyard. As Jamie was leaving for a church meeting around 6:30 p.m., she spoke with Chris Byers.
He ran right out in the bushes in between the 2 houses right here. And I said, "Christopher, go home." And he said, "I don't have to do what you tell me to do."
Right then, she says, Terry Hobbs called out to the boys.
And he said, "Get back down here to the house." And they went that direction.
Terry Hobbs has said to me that he did not see the boys at all that day.
If he says he did not see them, he's not telling the truth. He saw them. He was out there with them. He told them to come to his house.
I did not see Stevie at all, May the 5th.
Are they mistaken?
They're lying.
Terry, you gotta help me out. Why would they lie?
I don't know why.
Did you kill your stepson? Did you have anything to do with his death?
No, I did not.
And why should somebody believe you?
It's the truth.
The West Memphis police believe him.
If you would take us back to May the 5th.
After Hobbs spoke with them in 2007, they told the press that he was not and never had been a suspect. Hobbs says the killers are in prison.
Why would Damien Echols kill these boys? What was his motive?
I don't know.
But Echols' attorney, Dennis Reardon, argues in court documents that the evidence pointing to Hobbs would certainly help Damien, Jason, and Jesse at a new trial.
Proof beyond a reasonable doubt against Terry Hobbs? Perhaps not. Proof that would absolutely lead to the acquittal of these defendants at their trial? Absolutely, absolutely.
Also helpful is other unidentified partial DNA that was also found on the evidence. Reardon says if Damien and Jason abused the boys, as Jesse said, their DNA would have been found.
So the absence of it really is a very powerful factor. These were not sexually motivated satanic killings.
There are other troubling questions and possible suspects. Who was that muddy, bloody man at the Bojangles restaurant the night of the crime? Did the killer make a quick getaway on the interstate? Tens of thousands of trucks pass through here every day.
The fact that I'm not guilty means that there has been a child murderer left to walk the streets for the past 16 years.
It's not our job as a legal team to prove who committed these murders. However, I want to know who did it, and I think everybody does.
Lori Davis says support for the convicted men continues to grow as word of the dubious trial evidence, new forensics, and questions about jury misconduct spreads.
You want to do all you can, to help right the wrongs, and the clock is ticking. My biggest fear is, it's almost unutterable, is that justice is not served, not only for the 3 innocent men in prison, but also for those 3 little innocent boys.
Since the 1994 trials, most of the legal procedures, including this hearing last summer asking for new trials for Jason and Jesse, have been before Judge David Burnett, the original judge.
Jason, how do you feel about everything that's been going on so far?
I'm feeling positive about it.
Burnett denied both Jason and Jesse new trials. Damien's case is before the Arkansas State Supreme Court. He's prepared to go to federal court.
I just feel this momentum. There's the will to just right this wrong and to get this done and to get them out.
Do you actually think you will walk out of death row someday?
Yes, I do. I believe that with all my heart.
All right, Mr. Eccles, the jury having found you guilty of...
I don't believe that everyone all the way up the line is just going to sit on their hands and allow them to execute an innocent person.
A continuous intravenous injection.
Do you ever think about the families of Chris Byers, Steve Branch, and Michael Moore?
I do. I've thought about them quite a lot over the years, actually. I try to just remember where they're coming from and the hurt that they feel and what they've experienced that they'll probably never get over.
Michael Moore's father, Todd, supports the state's battle to uphold the verdicts. But some parents of the victims have had a change of heart.
He butchered my son and his two friends.
Chris Byers' father, Mark, who cheered the verdicts in 1994,
I'm here strictly for the truth.
now actively supports the West Memphis Three.
This has been a really difficult time for you, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't end.
Stevie Branch's mother, Pam, says her faith has helped her cope with her doubts about the case. She now believes Damien, Jason, and Jesse were railroaded.
Arkansas will never admit that they made a mistake. They're gonna stand on that these guys did it. We've got the right ones, and that's the way it is. I want the truth and nothing but. And once the truth and nothing but is known, I believe I can rest a little easier.
And that, she says, is what everyone deserves.
When I was a kid, I had a strange fear of being kidnapped. That always scared me, that there might be somebody that wanted to take me and I'd never see my family again. We were headed home from a family vacation in Mexico.
We were on the toll road headed north. Police car turned on their lights and siren. We're getting pulled over. I looked in the mirror and could see 8, 10 guys.
They all had guns with silencers on them.
There was nobody to turn to, nobody to call, nowhere to go.
After being told, I don't know how many times that you're gonna die, like, there's not a lot of other options to think.
Friday,